They say grief makes you invisible, but nothing prepares you for the moment your own children look through you, as if you're just another faded photograph in a forgotten hallway. When the world you built with the person you loved most starts slipping away piece by piece, how do you fight back? Stay with me, because the day I decided to stop being erased, everything changed. The armchair still whispered her essence. Predominantly lavender, yes, but with that almost subliminal undercurrent of pipe tobacco, a fragrant signature only Martha possessed, a personal cloud she'd unknowingly cultivated through decades of coupled evenings. I breathed it in deeply, the aged leather protesting softly beneath my weight, trying to draw the memory close, a shield against the encroaching desolation that had permeated the house since her departure. A pantheon of books encircled me, a bulwark fashioned from paper and ink. Dickens, Austen, the bard himself. Martha had adored them all and swept up in her adoration. I'd grown to revere them too. We'd whiled away countless evenings in shared recitation, our voices blending, the narratives weaving a mutual tapestry. Now the silence throbbed. I reached for her well-loved Persuasion, its spine creased like a roadmap from frequent journeys. A brittle forget-me-not marked her spot, mid-chapter 6. My breath hitched. I hadn't dared touch it since the word remained a phantom on my tongue, not yet uttered. Anemic sunlight seeped through the lace panels, igniting a ballet of dust motes in the stillness. Beyond the window, the garden languished, overgrown and neglected. I pictured Martha, kneeling among her roses, straw hat askew, laughter bubbling as she battled the aphid hordes. "They're gaining ground, Arthur," she'd call, eyes alight with mischief, and I'd hurry to her aid, armed with soapy water and a renewed sense of purpose. We'd spend hours, shoulder to shoulder, coaxing life from the soil. Now weeds throttled the roses, their blooms stunted and wan. I should venture out there, I knew she'd expect it, but confronting that void, that aching absence where she used to be, felt insurmountable. My gaze snagged on the mantel, on her cherished teacup, a fragile piece adorned with painted violets. It stood untouched, gathering a film of sorrow beside the faded photograph of our wedding day, two young innocents embarking on a shared odyssey. 70 years, an eon, and yet a fleeting breath. The house felt fractured, incomplete, not merely empty but askew, as if holding its breath, waiting. A car crunched on the gravel outside. Edward and Carol. Their visits had become a grim ritual since Martha's passing, faces etched with practiced concern. Or perhaps a cynical voice whispered something else entirely. "Dad," Edward's tentative call echoed from the hallway. "We're here." I closed Persuasion with a soft thud and returned it to its place. Curtain up, as Martha would quip, though this particular act felt less like entertainment and more like a reckoning. They breezed in, Carol a whirlwind of brisk efficiency, Edward trailing anxiously behind. "How are you holding up, Dad?" he queried, his gaze flitting about the room. "As well as one can expect," I managed, my voice sounding reedier than usual. Carol launched into a flurry of domestic engineering, smoothing creases, puffing pillows, as if staging a theatrical production. "We were thinking," she began, her tone too saccharine, "that perhaps it's time to consider future arrangements." My gut clenched. The future, a landscape devoid of Martha. A future, I feared, that excluded this house. "We've scouted out some rather lovely retirement communities," Edward interjected, his voice brimming with manufactured enthusiasm. "They offer a wide range of activities. Bingo, bridge, theatre trips." Bingo, bridge, theatre. Martha and I discovered our own grand stage right here, within these walls, in shared narratives, whispered confidences, the simple harmony of companionship. "I'm not ready for a retirement community," I stated, my voice surprisingly resolute. Carol's smile wavered. "But Dad, you can't possibly remain here alone. It's too much house for you. And what about the upkeep?" "The garden." "I'll manage," I insisted, the words leaving a bitter taste. The argument escalated, subtly, inexorably, the atmosphere growing dense with unvoiced fears and veiled accusations. They harped on my age, my well-being, my best interests. I listened, my heart plummeting with each carefully constructed phrase. Then Carol ventured, "It's what Martha would have wanted." That silenced me. A lie. Martha would have wanted my happiness, certainly, but she would never have wished me dislodged, severed from the home we'd cultivated together. "Do not presume to know Martha's desires," I retorted, my tone glacial. The ensuing silence hung heavy, fraught with unspoken grievances. Edward averted his gaze, shamefaced. Carol's eyes narrowed imperceptibly. "We're only trying to be supportive, Dad," she oozed, her voice dripping with false concern. I understood then, with a bone-deep certainty, that this charade had nothing to do with my welfare. It was about the property, the inheritance, the inconvenience of an aging parent. "I think it's time you departed," I said, my voice betraying none of the turmoil within. They left at last, their expressions a muddled tapestry of resentment and frustration. As their vehicle departed, an odd tranquility enveloped me. The lavender scent seemed to intensify, as if Martha were present, offering wordless solace. I would not be manipulated. I would not be disregarded. I would honor Martha's memory by living life as I saw fit. The following morning, I visited the bank. The teller, a young woman with kind eyes, offered a polite smile. "How may I assist you, Mr. Penhaligon?" "I wish to close my accounts," I announced, my voice steady and unwavering, "and transfer all funds to a newly established account, solely in my name." The teller's eyes widened almost imperceptibly, yet she remained composed, offering a nod and initiating the transaction. As I endorsed the papers, a sense of purpose flooded through me, a sensation I hadn't experienced since Martha's absence. A modest gesture, perhaps, but undeniably mine, my decision, and merely the initial step. The TV hummed a low, monotonous tune, a soundtrack to my solitary existence these days. The shepherd's pie Martha used to make, a symphony of savory beef and creamy mashed potatoes, was now a frozen brick, nuked to a lukewarm disappointment in my own microwave. I poked at it with my fork, the metallic tang a poor substitute for her gentle hand. I used to savor the evenings after Martha had retired to bed, with the quiet house and a good book. Now the quiet was a suffocating blanket. A car crunched on the gravel outside, Carol's red sedan. She was early, or perhaps I was simply losing track of time. Time, once a river flowing steadily onward, now felt like a stagnant pond, its surface clouded with memory. The doorbell chimed, a bright, insistent sound that jarred me. I set the half-eaten pie on the coffee table, a small act of rebellion against the pretense of normalcy that was about to descend. Carol and Edward stood on the porch, their faces etched with practiced concern. Carol clutched a casserole dish wrapped in foil, Edward a bottle of cheap wine. They beamed, artificial suns in the twilight. "Dad, we brought dinner," Carol chirped, stepping inside before I could even offer an invitation. Edward followed, maneuvering the wine bottle like a precious artifact. "Just thought we'd check in on you," Edward added, his voice a shade too hearty. "How thoughtful," I managed, the words feeling like gravel in my throat. They settled into the living room, their presence immediately shrinking the space. Carol surveyed the room, her gaze lingering on the faded wallpaper, the worn armchair, the dust motes dancing in the lamplight. I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, pity, disapproval, calculation. "How are you feeling, Dad, really?" Carol asked, her hand hovering over mine. I resisted the urge to pull away. "I'm managing," I said, the truth a vast and turbulent ocean hidden beneath that single, inadequate word. Edward uncorked the wine with a flourish, the pop echoing in the silence. He poured 3 glasses, the ruby liquid sloshing slightly. "To Dad," he announced, raising his glass, "and to moving forward." The phrase hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Moving forward, as if Martha were a mere obstacle to be overcome, a hurdle on the path to their convenience. We ate in strained silence, the clinking of forks against plates, the only sound besides their occasional, forced attempts at conversation. They talked about their lives, their jobs, their children, a litany of small triumphs and minor inconveniences that seemed utterly trivial in the face of my own profound loss. Carol's gaze swept across the living room again, lingering this time on the stack of books beside my armchair. I saw the glint of gold lettering on the spines: Dickens, Tolstoy, Proust. Martha had loved the classics as much as I did. They were a testament to a shared life, a silent rebuke to the emptiness that now surrounded me. "This place is getting a bit much for you, isn't it, Dad?" Carol said, her voice soft, almost coaxing. The gathering storm had broken. I swallowed, the lukewarm shepherd's pie suddenly a leaden weight in my stomach. "What do you mean?" I asked, though I already knew. "Well," she began, her eyes darting to Edward for support, "it's just the upkeep, the loneliness. We were thinking, maybe it's time to consider other options." Edward nodded, his expression earnest. "We've been doing some research, Dad. There are some lovely retirement communities nearby. All the amenities you could want and plenty of people your own age. Retirement communities." The words echoed in my head, a chilling pronouncement, a gilded cage, a slow, agonizing fade into oblivion. I looked at them, my children, their faces flushed with what they believed to be concern. But I saw something else there, too. A hunger, a barely concealed eagerness. They weren't worried about my well-being. They were worried about their inheritance. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, the old fear of confrontation rising within me. But something else was stirring, too. A flicker of defiance, a spark of the old Arthur Penhaligon, the man Martha had loved. I set down my fork, the clatter loud in the quiet room. "No," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I don't think so." The dining room loomed, a cavern of polished wood where the setting sun struck the table, a bright, accusatory slash. At its head, the familiar heft of my cane offered meager solace against the aching void within. Martha had once saturated this space with joy, the comforting scent of Sunday suppers and the lively clamor of her grandchildren. Now, only emptiness resonated. Carol's cough echoed unnaturally loud in the weighty stillness. Edward, beside her, sat ramrod straight, his tie a suffocating noose. 2 o'clock sharp they'd arrived. Punctuality that felt like a premonition of doom, a meeting masked as familial concern. "Dad," Edward began, his voice a practiced neutrality, "we've been exploring some avenues." "Avenues?" The word hung in the air, cloying like synthetic flowers. I followed his movement as he slid a manila envelope towards me. The soft thump seemed to vibrate through my very bones. "Regarding your situation," Carol added, her tone layered with forced sweetness. I didn't reach for it. I knew its contents intimately. Their purpose had been laid bare the previous day. Leaflets, glistening photos of smiling geriatrics engaged in light recreation. Financial projections, carefully crafted. A future planned and executed without my say. "We believe," Edward went on, now studying an invisible imperfection on the pristine linen, "that residential care would be ideal." The words hit like small, sharp stones. Residential care, not a haven, not a place for warmth or reminiscing. A clinical, efficient wrapping up of a problem they wished away. My grip tightened on the cane's smooth, cool surface, passed down from Martha's father, a robust piece of artistry that sustained him through his declining years. I had always seen it as an emblem of perseverance, of lasting power. Now, it felt like a last-ditch grasp at stability. "We've located a charming spot," Carol trilled. "Meadowbrook. Impeccable reputation. Around-the-clock attention, engaging programs, meals provided." Her voice droned on, illustrating a meticulously constructed existence, devoid of danger, devoid of me. Devoid of Martha's essence, which permeated this very house. The faint perfume of her lavender bushes lingering in the air, the subtle depression on her favorite chair. "Consider it, Dad," Edward implored, finally locking eyes with me. "So no more concern for groceries, housework, the garden, just pure relaxation." Relaxation. The idea felt like grit between my teeth. What did they imagine occupied my days? Vacant staring. I spent them caring for Martha's roses, losing myself in her beloved novels, listening to the symphonies she adored. I was immersed in her memory, in the shared universe we had fashioned together. That wasn't relaxation, it was remembrance. It was fortitude. The silence stretched, heavy and smothering. The grandfather clocks tick in the hall, each chime a blow against my weakening resolve. They were anticipating my response, my compliance, my signature relinquishing my autonomy. But I would not yield. My throat constricted, the words a knot in my chest. It was more than this house, though I cherished every weathered plank, every sunlit pane. It was something deeper, more elemental. It was my self-respect, the right to chart the course of my remaining days. It was honoring Martha's spirit by refusing to become a nuisance, a mere case study, a difficulty to be resolved. I studied my children, their faces mirroring a blend of concern and thinly disguised impatience. They failed to see me. They only saw an old man, weakened and susceptible, needing assistance. They failed to see the individual who had forged a life, a family, a dwelling. They failed to see the individual who still possessed the capacity for affection, for sorrow, for muted defiance. A wave of sickness washed over me, a sharp blend of grief and resentment. I felt utterly displaced, a foreigner in my own sanctuary, betrayed by those I loved most. The silence persisted, unbroken. Dust motes danced in the lavender-infused air, a scent that clung to everything Martha touched, a ghostly echo of her presence. My hand skimmed the peeling wallpaper as I drifted through the hallway. Each room stood as a spectral exhibit, a monument to a life vibrant and full, now hanging precariously by a thread. In the living room, the lopsided landscape above the plush armchair murmured of bygone Sundays, filled with Martha's melodious voice reading aloud. I pictured the Christmas tree, forever brushing the ceiling, Martha balancing precariously to crown it, Edward and Carol squabbling below. The walls seemed to pulse with the afterglow of those evenings. They plotted to exile me from this haven, to some clinical, brightly lit institution, echoing with the rattle of wheelchairs. A place where my memories, these vital tendrils, would wither into irrelevance. I nudged open the kitchen door. The time-worn tiles, the ineradicable stain near the sink, Martha's badge of honor from a beetroot jam debacle. I could almost hear her cheerful hum as she conjured a meal, an aromatic symphony of simmering tomatoes and garlic filling the air. She'd bathed these walls in sunshine yellow paint, a defiant gesture against the Yorkshire gloom. Bottled light, she'd declared. Now, that yellow seemed to falter, struggling against the gathering gloom. Upstairs, the banister, polished smooth by years of use, greeted my touch. I recalled Martha's faltering ascent in her final year, her grip tightening as she navigated the steps. I'd been her silent shadow, always close. Now, the silence roared. Her absence was a profound ache, a constant, dull pulse impervious to any remedy. Our bedroom, the floral wallpaper, Martha's beloved choice, still whispered of her perfume. The bed was precisely made, yet undeniably barren. Her dressing table, a repository of treasured trifles. A silver-backed mirror reflecting only emptiness. A congregation of antique perfume bottles. A time-worn photograph from our Cornish honeymoon. Lifting the photograph, its edges softened by time, I saw our younger selves, brimming with vitality, bathed in hope and infectious laughter. The salty breeze ruffled our hair, the sun blazed in our eyes. I closed mine, grasping for that untarnished joy. Carol had been all cool efficiency, weighing the merits of assisted living. "It's for the best, Dad," she'd said, her pitying tone cutting deeper than any harsh word. "You can't manage alone." Manage, I breathed. I remembered. And that, I understood, was everything. So long as these memories lived within these walls, so long as I felt her presence, I wasn't truly lost. I descended the staircase, each footfall resolute, my determination solidifying with every groan of the aged timbers. They wouldn't steal this from me. They wouldn't obliterate Martha. They would not sentence me to a desolate existence of sterile smiles and prescribed routines. I sought refuge in the small study, Martha's sacred space. The mahogany desk, scattered with her papers and unfinished verses, emanated a palpable sense of her spirit. Opening the bottom drawer, I retrieved a time-worn leather box. Inside, cradled amongst faded ribbons and dried blossoms, lay her will. I hadn't needed to consult it since her passing, but now it felt like salvation. As I reread the familiar script, a fresh pang of sorrow pierced my heart. Then I noticed something previously overlooked, a small codicil, penned in her graceful hand, tucked at the bottom, a clause granting me absolute authority over all our affairs. A slow smile stretched across my face. They saw me as a feeble old man, easily swayed, easily dismissed. They imagined I'd meekly accept their imposed fate. They were mistaken. Tomorrow, I would visit the bank, not to relinquish my independence, but to reclaim it, to remind them and myself that I remained Arthur Penhaligon, and my story was far from over. The phone's shrill ring had become a daily torment, each iteration laced with sharper barbs thinly veiled as concern. Carol spearheaded the assault, her voice a laser beam, cauterizing my resistance. "Dad, this is for you. You can't cope alone anymore. It's unsafe." "Unsafe?" I rasped, my voice a cracked record. "This house is my sanctuary. You're the ones desecrating it." David's subsequent call was a practiced balm, his tone silken, reasonable, yet the underlying coercion remained, a snake coiled beneath polished words. He passed figures, costs, liabilities, the ubiquitous and galling best solution for everyone. "Yes, Dad, the garden's a jungle. The gutters are probably choked. You haven't seen Dr. Ellis in ages." True enough. The garden had reverted to a wild state. The gutters likely overflowed. But Martha had relished her roses, and I dreaded the antiseptic tang of the clinic, the physician's pitying gaze. "I'm all right," I'd declare, each time the falsehood a lead weight on my tongue, perfectly independent. The hardest calls came from Sarah. Each conversation commenced with a drawn-out sigh, heavy with the burden I supposedly represented. "Dad, we all adore you, but you're being difficult. This isn't about us. It's for your own good." Good. The word soured on my palate. What about my well-being when they excised the last tangible piece of Martha? Each sunrise seemed to shrink the house, the walls pressing inward. I sought refuge in Martha's study, cocooned by her books, her charcoal sketches, her unfinished passions. Only there could I properly inhale. Could I almost recapture the echo of her laughter? But even there, shadows elongated, anxieties bloomed, doubt festered. Then came the day that shattered the dam. It was a bleak Tuesday, the light bleached and anemic. Rain lashed the windows, turning the world to smudged watercolor. I stood in the kitchen, attempting to assemble a sandwich, a pathetic affair of stale bread and insipid cheese, when I glimpsed it. A hulking, nondescript van branded with reliable relocations, grown to a halt before the house. My pulse stuttered. I froze, the bread knife skittering across the linoleum. This couldn't be transpiring. Not this way. Not today. I stumbled toward the entry, clumsy with the deadbolt. By the time I yanked the door open, two beefy figures in cerulean coveralls were already marching up the walkway. "Mr. Penhaligon," one inquired, his tone devoid of inflection. "We're here to pack your belongings." "Who? Who engaged you?" I choked out, my voice brittle. "We have a signed agreement," the man stated, producing a clipboard. His gaze remained fixed on the document. I knew instantly who had summoned them. Carol, in all probability, or David, hiding behind legal proxies. They hadn't even afforded me the courtesy of a warning. I watched detached as they began to dismantle my past. With clinical efficiency, they boxed photographs, shelved books, cocooned furniture in padded wraps. Each item they handled felt like a sliver of my soul being excised. Martha's cherished armchair, the reading lamp she favored, the cracked teacup we shared each morning, all of it departing, swallowed by the innards of that behemoth van. I attempted to protest, to plead, but the sounds died in my throat. Futile. I was a lone, aged man pitted against a ruthless enterprise, fueled by capital and devoid of compassion. The deluge intensified, mirroring the tempest within. I stood on the porch, powerless as they carried out the vestiges of my life. The residence felt eviscerated, a hollowed husk of its former glory. As the van receded, its red taillights vanishing down the lane, I remained stranded in the downpour. The house keys clutched desperately in my palm. Rain plastered my hair to my scalp, and I tasted the acrid tang of tears commingling with the frigid water. They had taken everything, or so they presumed. The car ride had been a blur of grey concrete and averted gazes. Carol had patted my hand, a gesture as hollow as the promises that had preceded this exile. David had stared straight ahead, his jaw tight, a muscle twitching near his temple. A sure sign of his discomfort. Sarah, bless her, had at least attempted conversation, asking bland questions about my lunch, my comfort, my future. Future, I thought, carefully curated by them. Now the engine's hum was replaced by a stark silence that amplified the frantic pounding of my own heart. The apartment was small, efficient, sterile. Beige assaulted me from every angle. Beige walls, beige carpet, beige everything. Even the air seemed tinged with beige. It was a color that screamed neutrality, an absence of personality, a deliberate attempt to erase any trace of the life I had lived. They had left, of course. "I will call tomorrow, Dad," Carol had chirped, her voice echoing in the empty space. David had offered a curt nod, and Sarah had lingered a moment longer, her eyes filled with a fleeting flicker of something that might have been guilt, before she, too, vanished. I was alone. I sat on the edge of the sofa, a stiff, uncomfortable thing upholstered in a fabric that felt vaguely synthetic. It was not my sofa. It held no memories of Martha and me, of Sunday afternoon naps, of shared laughter and whispered secrets. It was simply a sofa. The generic artwork on the wall, an abstract swirl of blues and greens that meant absolutely nothing, mocked me. It was art designed to offend no one, to soothe and pacify, but it only served to highlight the emptiness within me. I rose, my joints protesting with a familiar ache, and shuffled to the window. The city sprawled beneath me, a chaotic tapestry of noise and movement. Yellow taxis zipped through the streets like angry wasps. People hurried along the sidewalks, their faces etched with purpose, their lives unfolding in a dizzying rush. I felt utterly disconnected, an invisible observer, watching a play in which I had no part. They were all going somewhere, doing something, while I was here. Trapped in this beige purgatory, a forgotten relic of a bygone era. The sounds of the city, which once had been a comforting backdrop to my life, now felt like a cruel reminder of my isolation. I longed for the familiar creak of the floorboards in our hallway, the gentle tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the living room, the comforting scent of Martha's lavender soap. These were the sounds and smells of home, the anchors that had kept me grounded. Now, I was adrift. I tried to focus on something, anything outside the window. A small park across the street offered a patch of green amidst the grey. Children were playing, their laughter carrying faintly on the breeze. A young couple strolled hand in hand, their heads bent together in intimate conversation. I envied them, their youth, their vitality, their connection. I had once had all of that. The sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the city. The sky transformed into a fiery canvas of oranges and reds, a breathtaking spectacle that, in any other circumstance, would have filled me with awe. But tonight, it only deepened my sense of despair. The beauty of the world felt distant, unattainable. As darkness descended, I switched on a lamp. The artificial light did little to dispel the gloom. It simply cast a harsh, unwavering glare on the sterile walls, the soulless furniture, the stark reality of my new existence. I was invisible, forgotten. I sat back down on the sofa, the synthetic fabric scratching against my skin. The silence pressed in on me, suffocating. I closed my eyes, trying to conjure Martha's face, her voice, her touch. But even those precious memories seemed to be fading, slipping away like grains of sand through my fingers. I was losing her all over again, and this time I feared I might lose myself as well. The bank was the only place left where I felt anything close to control, where numbers and accounts and signatures weren't just a means to an end, but a statement of what was still mine, what hadn't been stolen. A quiet but powerful decision was taking shape in my mind, forming a plan to fight back. The drab walls felt accusatory. Even the sunlight, sieved through the emotionless window, seemed leached of warmth. I'd only bothered with bare necessities: toothbrush, razor, a couple of shirts. Futile, really. This wasn't it. Home smelled of Martha's lavender and hummed with the comfortable chaos of shared existence. This was limbo, a sterile waiting room. Yet the forced stillness grated. I couldn't simply stagnate. A need arose to occupy my hands, perhaps even soothe the dull throb in my chest. With a sigh, a physical weight, I wrestled open one of the final cartons. Odds and ends, labelled in Martha's precise hand, mostly trinkets, remnants of a life. Sepia-toned photographs, a chipped teacup she'd treasured, a collection of honeymoon seashells, each a painful echo of vanished days. I sorted through them, like a hesitant excavator unearthing remnants of a lost world. Then, at the carton's base, cradled by a faded silk scarf, it appeared, a small oblong package bound with aged blue ribbon. My fingers trembled as I lifted it. It resonated with significance. I didn't place it immediately. Then a spark of recognition. Martha guarded secrets. Small private havens. I never trespassed. She deserved autonomy, even intertwined with me. With painstaking care, I untied the ribbon. It nearly disintegrated in my grasp, brittle with time. Inside, letters, dozens, secured by a delicate strand of ribbon. My name graced the top one in Martha's script. To my dearest Arthur, it began. I sank onto the bed's edge, heart hammering. What were these missives? Why conceal them? Had she corresponded with another? The thought, illogical as it was, stung with a jab of jealousy. Then I recalled Martha's playful smirk, her bright eyes hinting at mischief. Not an affair, something else entirely. I unfolded the top sheet. The paper, thin and yellowed, displayed ink blurred by the passage of years. The date stamped at the summit was nearly half a century old. I began to read. My dearest Arthur, she had penned, I know the prospect of launching into the unknown worries you, abandoning your reliable position to pursue the dream tucked away in your heart. Don't allow it to... Her fire burns within you, Arthur, a fervent passion I adore. Don't let fear extinguish it. I believe in you, more completely than you could ever know. Take that leap. Embrace the life you were destined to lead. I'll be there, cheering, every step of the way. Tears clouded my vision. I'd nearly forgotten that chapter. The fear, the hesitation, Martha was steadfast, my unwavering foundation. I had nearly eclipsed the depth of her faith in me. I devoured another letter, then another. Each a precious jewel of affirmation, an enduring chronicle of her love and backing. Some reflected taxing periods when the bookstore teetered on the brink, others, brimming with joy, marked achievements and significant moments. Remember your purpose, Arthur, she urged in one. Recall the joy sparked in sharing the magic contained within books. That's all that matters. That's the sustaining force. As I read, a warmth began to bloom within, eroding the icy despair that had taken root. Martha wasn't gone, not truly. She lingered in these letters, her voice echoing, her love palpable. She was reminding me of my essence, my potential. These letters transcended mere words. They were a lifeline, a tangible connection. Even within these beige walls, haunted by the ghosts of the past, I wasn't completely untethered. Martha had gifted me a chart, a route back to myself. In that instant, I knew my course. I wouldn't fail her. I wouldn't permit them to prevail. I would fight for my home, the memories held within, the life we'd cultivated, and I'd start by finding a way to cherish her memory, ensuring her indomitable spirit lived on. The line at the bank coiled back on itself, a sluggish metallic beast restrained by tight nerves and the whisper of aged currency. My cane felt solid beneath my grip, its polished surface radiating warmth. Martha had always handled this domain. Her rapport with figures was uncanny, a quiet magnetism that charmed tellers and captivated lenders. Now I was alone in this maze, acutely aware of my 76 years. Finally, I stood before a young woman, her auburn hair escaping from behind an ear, her eyes radiating kindness. "Good morning, sir. What can I do for you?" Carolyn Davies, her name tag proclaimed. "I need to make a rather substantial withdrawal," I managed, my voice trembling slightly. The words carried a weight disproportionate to their length. Carolyn's smile remained steady. Certainly, sir. May I have your account information? I pushed my card across the polished surface, watching her fingers dance across the keyboard. The staccato rhythm filled the momentary silence. Then she looked up, a slight crease forming on her brow. "Mr. Penhaligon?" she inquired gently, her tone laced with concern. I nodded. "Is everything all right, sir? This is a considerable sum." Hesitation snagged at my throat. I didn't wish to burden her with my grief, yet her earnestness was disarming. "My wife. She recently passed away." A wave of sympathy washed over her features. "Oh, Mr. Penhaligon, I am deeply sorry for your loss." She paused, searching for the right words. "Losing someone you love. It's never easy." "No," I rasped. The sound caught in my chest. "It isn't." She offered silent empathy, a comforting presence. A moment later, she refocused. "How much would you like to withdraw, sir?" I stated the amount. A hefty figure, one that could indeed shift fortunes. Carolyn didn't even blink. She simply nodded and initiated the transaction. As she meticulously counted out the bills, she offered light conversation, the weather, the mundane details of my day. It was a welcome reprieve from the anvil in my chest. "So, Mr. Penhaligon, anything exciting planned for today?" she inquired, presenting me with the stack of notes. I almost laughed hollowly. Exciting. My days now consisted of hollow echoes in empty rooms, yet something in her tone, in her unaffected curiosity, gave me pause. "Actually," I began, a nascent idea flickering to life. "Martha, my wife and I, we always spoke of opening a bookstore, a small, intimate haven brimming with beloved tales." Carolyn's face illuminated. "That's a beautiful dream, Mr. Penhaligon. My daughter, Lily, is an avid reader. She practically lives at the library." Her joy at the thought of her child was palpable. "Do you think you might actually do it?" I shrugged, attempting to quell the sudden bloom of hope threatening to engulf me. "It's just a notion," I demurred, but the seed had taken root. "Well, I think it's a wonderful notion," she replied, handing me the transaction slip. "Good luck with whatever you decide, Mr. Penhaligon." I offered my thanks, carefully securing the cash and the receipt within my coat. As I turned, our eyes met. "Thank you, Carolyn," I said, my gratitude running deeper than she could fathom. Stepping outside, the sun felt intensely bright. The urban clamor, typically a discordant assault, almost resonated with optimism. I halted on the pavement, my gaze drawn across the street to a vacant shop, its windows veiled in dust. It was modest, unpretentious, yet something about it tugged at me. A bookstore. Martha's aspiration, our aspiration. My eyes drifted shut, summoning her image, surrounded by books, her face radiant with joy. The vision was so clear, so tangible, it felt as though she stood beside me. A surge of resolve pulsed through my veins. I wouldn't allow her dream to wither and die. I would not let my children make my decisions. I would honor Martha's memory, and I would do so on my own terms. The battle was not concluded. It had merely taken a new shape. Mr. Harding, the bank manager, tweaked his tie, a habit I'd catalogued during prior, less ambitious dealings. "Mr. Penhaligon," he began, his tone a studied blend of concern and detachment. "Are you quite certain?" "To liquidate almost everything at once, nay, it's a rather momentous step." I offered a thin smile. "Absolutely, Mr. Harding. Martha and I always championed seizing opportunities. This one, it resonates." So also I kept Carolyn Davies and her daughter Lily, whose untainted joy had been the catalyst to myself. Harding wouldn't grasp it. He leaned back, the leather of his chair groaning beneath him. Naturally. Still, I'm obliged to counsel caution. Retirement plans, investments, they're designed for safeguarding your future. He toyed with a pen, its click a miniature metronome of doubt. Perhaps a partial drawdown would be more judicious. "Judicious?" I echoed, the word leaving a bitter taste. Martha's careful planning had provided comfort, true, but had it also precluded truly living? "I appreciate your reservations, Mr. Harding, but my mind is made up." The legalities proved surprisingly swift. A sprinkling of signatures, a few sets of initials, and a lifetime's worth of savings transformed into figures on a bank draft. A brief sting of anxiety flickered, instantly quelled by the growing exhilaration. This wasn't closure, it was genesis. The drive to Port Blossom felt longer than memory suggested. The coastline, once so familiar, now possessed a subtle newness, the colors richer, the air crisper. Martha had always adored the bracing sea air. I pictured her beside me, scarf dancing in the breeze, spotting the gulls circling above. The bookstore was in poorer condition than the realtor's photos had implied. The book nook, the time-worn sign proclaimed, letters flaking and askew. Paint peeled like sunburnt skin, the windows were clouded with grime, and the whole place exuded an aura of weariness. It stood on a quiet lane, tucked away from the town's vibrant heart. Mrs. Ainsworth, a woman etched with fatigue, greeted me with undisguised relief. She was clearly anxious to be free of it. "It's been in my family for generations," she explained, her voice colored with both sorrow and acceptance, "but I simply can't keep it going. The roof leaks, the heating's erratic, and the books—" She gestured wearily at the crowded interior. "They just don't move the way they used to." Inside, a dense thicket of bookshelves rose, laden with dusty tomes. The air hung heavy with the aroma of decaying paper and damp. Sunlight struggled to pierce the dingy windows, casting long, morose shadows, a disaster to be sure, and utterly perfect. I spent the next hour listening as Mrs. Ainsworth recounted the shop's lineage, its halcyon days, its gradual decline, nodding politely. My mind, however, was already ablaze with possibilities. Fresh paint, improved lighting, inviting armchairs, the scent of brewing coffee. I envisioned children nestled in corners, absorbed in cherished tales, adults wandering the aisles, rediscovering forgotten treasures. Martha would have reveled in it. The signing of the purchase agreement was a brief formality, completed in a small, stuffy office at the rear. Mrs. Ainsworth seemed genuinely touched, even misty-eyed, as she relinquished the keys. Standing alone in the silent, musty shop, the keys feeling weighty in my palm, I shut my eyes and drew a long breath. The air was stale, yet beneath it, a faint, enduring scent of ink and paper lingered. A promise of stories, waiting to resurface. I opened my eyes and smiled. The book nook. It demanded dedication, considerable effort, and unwavering faith, but it held a pledge, a promise of reinvention, of purpose, of something meaningful to fill the emptiness within, a promise I fully intended to fulfill. The musty fragrance of aging paper mingled with sun-dusted air, a heady perfume that sparked an old hunger. I plunged into the bookstore renovation with zeal reborn. Grit surrendered to elbow grease as I coaxed the honeyed grain from beneath layers of grime. Each stroke a whispered prayer to Martha's memory, while painting the walls a serene tea-rose cream. Carolyn Davies, with her insightful nature, had understood this wasn't a mere venture. It was a sanctuary awaiting revival. Days dissolved into evenings as I sifted through forgotten literary troves. Venerable first editions with fragile spines, well-worn paperbacks echoing with readers' notes, children's books whose vibrant illustrations rekindled long-dormant joy. These I arranged with meticulous care, crafting inviting tableaus of literary delight. A time-worn Wuthering Heights rested beside dried lavender, a Hemingway anthology sharing space with a time-worn globe. The grand opening became a kaleidoscope of faces, a soft susurrus of voices, the gentle flip of pages. Port Blossom clearly craved a place like this. Martha's musings, as it was christened, swiftly evolved into a refuge. Children sprawled, lost in imagined realms. Silver-haired gentlemen debated philosophies over steaming coffee cups, and young lovers murmured secrets amidst the poetry. Laughter, a rare melody in my life lately, now resonated throughout the space. It breathed, it thrived, a living memorial to Martha's spirit. I found myself lingering late, not from duty, but from sheer, untainted pleasure. New works were ordered, author talks hosted, even a weekly book circle sprouted. I was immersed in tales, amid those who cherished them, within a community that embraced me. This deviated from the quietude my children had envisioned. This was life. The inevitable clash arrived on a tempestuous Tuesday. My son, Charles, his expression taut with disapproval, stood amid the lovingly curated chaos of the bookstore. My daughter, Eleanor, hovered behind, a portrait of nervous concern. "Dad, we need a word," Charles began, his tone clipped. This is preposterous. "You can't possibly handle all of this. It's unseemly," Eleanor seconded, a worried edge to her voice. "And the finances, Dad. You've depleted your savings. What about your security?" I placed the dog-eared Little Women I'd been dusting on a table and truly saw them. And I recognized not concern, but calculation. Not affection, but command. "My security is right here," I responded, gesturing around the animated bookstore. "I'm content, genuinely content, for the first time in ages. This isn't about money, Charles. It's about purpose. It's about honoring Martha's memory." Charles scoffed dismissively. "Martha would want you comfortable, secure." "Martha wanted me to thrive," I countered, my voice unwavering. "To discover joy, to connect, to contribute. And that's precisely what I'm realizing." Eleanor wrung her hands anxiously. "But Dad—" "No buts, Eleanor. I appreciate your worry, but I'm wholly capable of managing my own affairs. I'm not helpless. I'm not a child. I'm a man who's finally found his compass." They departed, defeated, but unconvinced. I knew their attempts to intervene would persist, yet something had transformed within me. Grief lingered, a muted ache, but it no longer dominated. It was tempered by drive, by passion, by the unshakable conviction that I walked the right path. A few weeks passed, and I found myself in my solicitor's office, a collection of documents arrayed before me. The Martha Penhaligon Literacy Foundation. It was a fitting homage, a means of guaranteeing that Martha's passion for books and knowledge would continue to inspire future generations. A percentage of the bookstore's earnings, along with a considerable amount from my own accounts, would finance literacy schemes for disadvantaged children in Port Blossom and beyond. As I signed the final sheet, a wave of serenity washed over me. Martha would have approved. This extended beyond mortgages and balance sheets. It encompassed legacy, love, ensuring that her soul lived onward, not only within me, but within others. I was crafting something enduring, something meaningful, something of value. This was my next chapter, and Martha was present every step forward,